Welcome to manna-fest, hosted by international evangelist, teacher, and author Perry Stone. Enjoy unique insight into prophetic and practical truth. It's time to feast on fresh manna, so get ready to be blessed and encouraged. And now, here is your host and teacher, Perry Stone.
I have titled this A Prophetic Alert, Trouble in the 70th Year. And I'm going to read a verse from the book of Daniel, and I'm going to build around this verse, although this is a verse that happened in history. History does repeat itself according to Ecclesiastes 1, 9, and 10. I've taught you that for many, many years. Daniel 9:25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And here's the main verse, and the streets shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. That last phrase, the wall will be built in troublous times, is a prophecy connected to what we're going to talk about that has happened recently in America. And this is a very deep prophetic word. I'm going to have you to follow me very carefully, because what I'm going to show you is how history is repeating itself, and that this passage that deals with Cyrus giving the Jews a decree to go back to Jerusalem after 70 years, they were going to take and build a wall, but it was going to be a lot of trouble involved once the decree was made. Now, we have to talk a little bit about the nation of Israel here, because this is where the foundation of this verse actually comes in at, with Daniel and the Babylonian captivity and the Jews returning from their Babylonian captivity to build the walls of Jerusalem. This is what it's speaking about, and restore the gates. If you will look throughout modern history, since especially 1948, you will discover that the United States has been directly involved in one form or another. Our leaders have, our presidents have, with Israel as a nation. But I want to share with you a little bit of some things that you might not be aware of. Harry Truman was the president that announced and gave the order for the UN to agree to reestablish the nation of Israel in 1948. If the United States had not done that, there would have been great difficulty with the process. The UN carved out a territory for the Jewish people in the area of Palestine. But I want to tell you that I have Harry Truman's biography, which was written by historians, in its 2 volumes. When Harry Truman began to announce the reestablishment of Israel, he hit his desk with his fist and screamed, "I am Cyrus." Cyrus, the king that gave the decree for the Jews to return from Babylon back to Jerusalem. He was saying he was a picture of that king. Then we have in the 1973's Richard Nixon, that received a call at 3 o'clock in the morning from Golda Meir, who was at that time the Prime Minister of Israel, saying there's a war breaking out. We need help and we need assistance. Richard Nixon later said that he heard his Quaker mothers, they were Quakers, voice in his ear when he heard that woman talk. And he assisted taking weapons and shipping them into Israel, which helped Israel win the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And it was a very terrible war, but Nixon is known as the person that helped make that happen, along with Henry Kissinger. 1987, Reagan was president of the United States. And the Soviet Jews began to be released from Russia with the help of Mikhail Gorbachev, the Pope, and Ronald Reagan. I call it the Pope, the Eagle, and the Iron Sickle. And these 3 men got together, and the Russian Jews began to be released. And it was 70 years they had been in Russia. 70 years the Jews had not been able to leave the Soviet Union. 1917 to 1987, 70 years. Then in 2018, President Donald Trump did something that every other president promised to do since 1967, but never did, because they were politically afraid to do it. In 2018, in the month of May, President Trump announced that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and the U.S. Embassy would be moved from Tel Aviv to the city of Jerusalem, which officially recognized the city of Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. The point that I make, and you're already aware of this, that it happened on Israel's 70th anniversary. Because you say, how do you add that up? Well, 1948 to 2018 is 70 years. And this 70 years was noted by the rabbis in Israel. It was noted by preachers in America who preach prophecy as very significant. And I'm going to get into that in the next few moments. Immediately, even in Jerusalem newspapers, there was a picture of Trump being compared to a king by the name of Cyrus, the very king of Daniel 9:25 that gave the decree for the Jews to go back to Jerusalem, rebuild the city of Jerusalem, and return to Israel, and even take the treasures of their temple with them. Who was Cyrus? He was a Gentile king. The Medes and the Persians had overthrown the Babylonian Empire. And Cyrus came in and gave a decree for the Jews, ending their 70 years of captivity. Jeremiah had said in Jeremiah 25:11 that they would be in captivity in Babylon for 70 years. But that decree is what released them to leave Babylon and go back to their homeland. I'm just laying a foundation right now so that everybody will know where we're going. Listen carefully. Had the old leaders stayed in power at the end of that 70 years, Nebuchadnezzar had died, but Belshazzar would have never released the Jews to go back to their homeland. There had to be a change in administrations for Cyrus to come in and take over Babylon, and for Cyrus to have the favor of God, because you may not know this, but it was predicted in the Old Testament that Isaiah said, Cyrus my shepherd, and even predicted a story about the gates, and he went under the gates of Babylon at the night that the party was taking place, and the king was having a drunken party, and the handwriting on the wall occurred. This night your kingdom would be taken from you, the prophet said. And ladies and gentlemen, Cyrus's name was penned in the Bible 150 years before it ever happened. And Jewish history says that Daniel showed him the prophecies that were in the Bible where God had named him. And immediately he gave favor to the Jews and favor to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and said, you can go back to your land, you can rebuild your city, and I'll even take the treasures that's in the temple of Marduk, and I'll let you take those temple treasures back. And they carried back what the enemy had tried to take. And somebody needs to thank God for his word. Woo! Cyrus's decree is important because it's parallel to what we've seen recently. Number one, Cyrus's decree was that Jerusalem belonged to the Jewish people. Cyrus's decree number two was that they could return to their land and they could rebuild their city. Decree number three was that they could return with their wealth or their treasures and use them in a temple that they were getting ready to build. However, here is what is in the Bible, and here is what the Holy Spirit told me to tell you, because we're going to follow what I'm about to say very deeply in the next few moments, are very deep. It says in the Bible, the decree will come forth and the street will be rebuilt, meaning the city will be rebuilt, the nation will be rebuilt, and there will be a wall built in troublous times. And we understand it's talking about Jerusalem's wall there, but everything has a parallel. That which has been is that which shall be. Ladies and gentlemen, the decree would occur, but there would be serious trouble as a result of that decree being made. It was resisted. This decree was resisted by a group of people in the government back in the time of the Jews, because Samaria was then the headquarters. Now, let me stop and move ahead in history. In May of 2018, when President Trump announced Jerusalem as the capital, announced the embassy would be moved there, it was during the 70th anniversary of Israel as a nation. Oddly enough, immediately, people began to say that he was a modern-day Cyrus. In fact, when he began to talk about this, coins were minted in Israel. Now, this is not official currency that you spend with, but these are mementos and coins that are made. Cyrus, Belfar, Trump, Declaration, 1917 to 2017, and you see it there in Hebrew, and this is called a temple coin. People have noticed if you put a beard on President Trump, he even looks like Cyrus. Now, these coins, again, are not currency. but they are very popular. They're being purchased and taken to people around the world. And the the head rabbis in Israel, the ones that I read after, really truly believe that our president is almost, we don't believe this, of course, a reincarnation of the Cyrus that existed a long time ago in the time of the Babylonian captivity. But however, pay attention. When the Jews came back from Babylonian captivity at the end of 70 years, and they got to their city, they had, pardon my expression, all hell break loose. They had resistance. They had people trying to stop the building of the wall. They had people that tried to do their best to hinder their work. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go somewhere. That was my introduction to the message right there. Now we're about to go into the message that I feel the Holy Spirit wants me to give you. Why is it that since May, when this decree was made by the president, why has all hell broke loose on the administration? Why is it that the majority of media has turned completely against him, has nothing good to say? Something has a parallel in history that we need to look at that is being repeated. Let me give you the verse again. The latter part of Daniel 9:25, the streets shall be built again. That means the rebuilding of the city, or as someone noted has said, make America great again by bringing jobs and infrastructure back. There's a parallel. Then it says, and the wall would be built, but there's going to be a lot of troublous times involved in the rebuilding process. Now, in the Hebrew scriptures, the word troublous in the Daniel 9 verse means distress, stressful, a series of troubles that begin at the same time. Not trouble, troublous. So because it's a plural word, it means here comes a problem. Bam, there comes a problem. Bam, there comes a problem. Does it not sound like what they've been dealing with in the swamp? One thing after the other, after the other. And Nehemiah, we're going to talk about Nehemiah, we're going to talk about Ezra, we're going to talk about Daniel a little bit. We're going to combine this together. But when they went to take that wall and rebuild the street, the Samaritans had 3 men in their government, because Samaria had become the government when Jerusalem was destroyed. They had money coming in. They had trade coming in. The Jews had been away for 70 years. So they saw it as an economic threat for the Jews to come in and do that wall. To build the wall, it means that they would reestablish an economic system in a place where the politicians in the swamp didn't want that economic system to be developed. Y'all going to read through this in a little bit and figure it all out, I promise you. There was a man by the name of Nehemiah. Everybody say Nehemiah. And you can read the story in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah comes along and begins to rebuild a wall that causes great trouble for Israel, because only when he talked about the wall did the Samaritans go crazy. Only when he started working on the wall did the politicians of Samaria begin to manifest and begin to do their best to make sure that the wall would never be built. Nehemiah, however, was the new governor of Judea. He had been appointed by the kings of Persia to go into Judea to be the governor. Let's say it this way. Nehemiah was not a priest. He was not a prophet. He was a reformer. And they hated the reforms that Nehemiah, I'm about to preach here in a minute, was presenting to the city of Jerusalem and Judea. Nehemiah also, if you'll read his story, check this one out, had enemies on the inside of his administration working against him. Nehemiah, I'll show you in a moment, had to end up firing people inside the administration in Jerusalem, including a bunch of priests. Does this sound familiar to anything that's happened recently? Now, I'm about to lay the big one on you right here. I want to just lay it on you right now and get this out of the way. You ready? There are only several places in the Bible where Satan is mentioned in the Old Testament. As a matter of fact, if you come to the New Testament, Paul said, Satan has hindered us. I have a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan. Satan tempts Jesus. Why, though, in the Old Testament do you have Isaiah 14, Ezekiel chapter 28 that alludes to him, Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2, and a very small verse that mentions him one time in the book of Zechariah? But guess what I'm going to tell you? If you will look, when this decree was made, Satan didn't have a lot going on until the decree was made about Jerusalem. And ladies and gentlemen, Satan starts showing up after the decree, at the end of 70 years, more in one time frame than you read at any other time frame in the Old Testament. Want to prove it to you? You want to go there with me? First of all, I'll give you 3 quick examples here. First of all, in 538 BC, Daniel is in Babylon, the Medes and Persians have taken over, and a prince of the kingdom of Persia, which is a principality demon, shows up in the atmosphere in Daniel chapter 10 and hinders the prayer answer, not the prayer from going up, but the answer that Daniel is seeking prophetically for 21 days. You don't find that any other place in the Bible. A demon prince over Babylon. Why is Satan so upset that he wanted to make sure, get me the biggest prince I can find over that nation that's ruled that part of the world, and set him right over top of Daniel's head, and you make sure Daniel doesn't get an answer, you make sure he never understands the vision, you make sure that none of this makes sense to him. So Satan sends a deep, dark prince in the atmosphere, Ephesians 6 and 12, principality, to block the prayer of the man of God. Check this out. Woo! And then we find in 537 to 538 BC, same time frame, this is in Zechariah 3, 1 through 4, the Jews have gone back to Jerusalem. They are trying to rebuild the temple. They're in the process of cleansing the altar, and it says this, he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the presence of the Lord, and Satan standing among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, the angel actually said it, the Lord rebuke you, Satan, even the Lord that has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked out of a fire? Satan himself shows up on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem at the end of the 70 years when a decree has been made that the Jews are going to Is anybody understanding what I'm about to tell you? No big problem when you're in captivity. No big problem when the Jews for 70 years are living in Babylon. But when a leader named Cyrus makes a decree in the spirit realm and fulfills a prophecy, then Satan hates the fulfillment of prophecy. He hates it when a word has been spoken and a man or maybe a woman comes along, and sometimes with or without their knowledge, they do something that enacts a prophetic word. Satan is angry at them because now they're coming back to Jerusalem. Now the stories and the prophecies over Jerusalem can continue. Now the prophecies about the Messiah can continue. Now the prophecies about coming out of Bethlehem will be a king can now be fulfilled. The devil had him out of their property, and he didn't care. But when the decree came to bring him back, the enemy knew, I'm now in trouble, because now what the prophets have said can begin to come to pass. Hey. Now, the third example is Esther. Now, Esther is 60 years later after this, according to some scholars, but she's in Persia. Now, the Medes and Persians are still ruling, remember that. And there's 127 provinces where there are Jews. And what happens there, and although Satan is not mentioned by name, you can see his fingerprints all over it. He brings Haman, a government leader. Somebody say government, there's the government again. A government leader who is corrupt and evil, who hates the Jews because he's an Agagite. And if you want to know anything about the Agagites, help me preach here, somebody. King Saul was supposed to kill King Agag and did not, kept him alive, and Samuel came along and killed that king, and somehow a baby got born in that group, and that descendancy of King Agag continued all the way up to the time of Esther, and Haman was a descendant of a king that a Jewish leader slew. He had a vendetta against the Jews, and he built 10 gallows, are you listening? To kill the Jews and have Mordecai, who was part of the court there, to have him murdered and slay the Jews. Satan's fingerprint is still showing up, trying to annihilate the seed of Abraham, the natural seed of Abraham. So watch this. Let me retrace it with you. No problem till the decree comes. Everything's cool till the decree comes. But when the decree comes, trouble starts. Troublous times. And part of that trouble, you better hear me, is instigated by Satan himself. We are about to get deep, so you better hang on. We are about to get deep. Give the Lord a praise. Now, let me say it to you this way. They have asked me, people have asked me, because, you know, you preach prophetic things, and I really do try to stay away from politics, but I do preach prophecy with nations and leaders. I have to. I have no choice. That's my calling. Someone said, what gave our president the boldness to stand in front of the Palestinian world, the Arab world that does not even believe Israel, some of them at least has a right to exist, that does not believe that the capital needs to be the Palestinian state, and yet he looks in the camera, he stands on a stage and makes a decree. How can he do it? Here's the answer. Every politician and president before him was owned by people or companies. All right, let me go back to this because I don't want to get sidetracked too far. Satan shows up at the end of the 70 years when the decree comes, and President Trump hit, and I'm going to say it publicly, Satan himself when he made that decree about Jerusalem. I'm telling you. Satan didn't send the prince of Arabia or the prince of Persia or the prince of Iran. Satan himself said, I got to stop this man. I got to stop him before he does more damage. And let me explain to you from the eyes of Satan, an actual fallen being, why this decree is so dangerous to him. Because when you start seeing attention go to Jerusalem, to Israel, to expand it, to prosper it, this is what Psalm said. When the Lord shall build up Zion, then he will appear in his glory. The coming of the Lord is linked to the prosperity of Jerusalem and Israel. And Satan knows if I keep letting a man like this understand the Bible. Come on, we've had previous presidents that not only didn't understand the Bible, they didn't believe nothing that was written in the Bible. But we've got an individual that has surrounded himself with preachers and ministers who know what the Word of God says, and the devil knows he's running out of time. Hey, hey! Yes, he does. It was literally indescribable. It was without a doubt, according to our attendees, the greatest main event in 32 years. And now we have the DVDs and the CDs available for our manna-fest television audience. I want to explain to you 5 messages that I preached. I preached a message called The Prophetic Meaning of the New Jewish Year 5779. I took that year, translated it back to the meaning of the letters of the alphabet, and reveal an amazing projection of what to expect spiritually, politically, and prophetically for this coming year. You've got to hear this. It is a stunning revelation. Then the Solomon Code. Hundreds of attendees told our staff that this was the most powerful revelatory message that the Lord had ever given me to preach, detailing types and shadows of the 3 men that built the tabernacles and the dwelling places for God. I'm going to tell you how heaven lost its song, how David tapped into the spirit world and brought the song back to earth, and how you, through worship and praise, and through singing, restore heaven's song back to God. You've got to hear this message. Here's one that's a real stirrer. Will the church go through the tribulation? The most controversial subject is the timing of the coming of the Lord. A lot of people seem to be accepting the post-tribulation return as the date of Christ's return. I'm going to use numerous scriptures in defense of the pre-tribulation theory and expose the weaknesses in the post-tribulation teaching. I believe you're going to find out that this truth and this revelation is found in the Bible, that Jesus is coming before the time of the tribulation. Then I preached on the prophetic alert, the trouble in the 70th year. I wondered why in May of this past year, when it was announced that the embassy was returning to Jerusalem, all hell broke out against the administration. I found the patterns in Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. The wall will be rebuilt, the Bible said, in troublous times. You've got to hear this major prophetic word that was preached at the main event. And finally, I preached a message called Concealed Messages from the Angels Who Delivered Lot. I'm going to show you that the things that the angels said to Lot are the very things they're saying to America, and what they predicted to Lot will happen here in the United States and parts of the world. I'm telling you, I want you to get these CDs and DVD albums. It also includes Ron Carpenter preaching Your Book of Destiny in Heaven, Bishop Tudor Bismarck preaching Being Delivered, Mary Morello preaching Becoming Armed and Dangerous in the Spirit. These 8 messages come in an album. You can get the CDs for $55 a set, the DVDs for $95 a set, and postage is included. Call the 1-888-21-BREAD number, or contact us at Voice of Evangelism with the address that is on the screen. God bless you. Please get the DVDs or the CDs of the unedited version of this conference. You will not want to miss it. There's much more to tell you than we have time to tell you. Very quickly, I'm coming to Evangel Assembly of God in Jacksonville, Florida, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, January 25th through 27th. And we've added this, Beaumont, Texas, February 8th through the 10th, Cathedral Church there in Beaumont, Texas with Pastor Randy Felshaw. Please join us in these meetings if at all possible, because you know, there's so much that can happen through television and you can get blessed by the preaching of the Word. But I have learned after many years of traveling that there's something about the atmosphere of being with God's people. You should not forsake the assembling of yourselves together with God's people, whether it's a Sunday service or Wednesday fellowship. Sometimes it's a small group, and other times it's a major conference like we have. So please don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. Get with God's people, make kingdom connections, make new friendships, and most of all, get into the presence of God, because that's where your life and your heart will be changed. Hoping to see you next week as you watch manna-fest. I want you to join me and my entire family for my 60th birthday celebration at sea on a brand new Norwegian cruise ship. It is an Alaskan cruise. That's going to be June 23rd through the 30th of 2019. We need to get you the information, so go online at perrystone.org to get the details and book your tour through Noseworthy Travel to ensure those special meetings where I'm going to be preaching at sea and you can meet Pam and myself and we can have a great time together. Hope to see you there.